In the US, about 1 in 31 children have been identified to have autism, according to the CDC survey last done in 2022. Yet, in the year 2000, the incidence was only 1 in 150. That means that we are approaching nearly one child in every US classroom with autism. So, what can we do about this growing concern and how can we support it better? Today, I'm talking with Erin Geddes, who is going to share how she has made lifestyle and diet changes for her neurodivergent family of 5. I'm Norma Flood, and I'm an integrative and functional nutritionist. Welcome to Go With Your Gut in collaboration with Triata World. Welcome, Erin. Thank you for joining me today. I think our timing is very appropriate because it happens to be Autism Awareness Acceptance Month in April. And here we are recording in April. And I am going to make sure we post this before the very end of April. So thank you again for being here. How are you doing today?
Hey, I can see the weekend from here.
Yes, I'm sure every day is busy. Of course, that leads me right into this first question. You are a family of 5, a neurodivergent family, and I'm sure there are challenges that come up every day. Please tell me, I guess, where it all started.
My own personal awareness. I seem to be that individual, especially in childhood, who danced to the beat of a different drum. I was never in the in crowd. I struggled with friendships. I was relentlessly bullied. I just didn't go right in with the mainstream crowd. I was an individual and I guess a stubborn individual at that.
Did you have a sense that there was any neurodivergence that you were experiencing? Was there a diagnosis that you were aware of, or was that pretty much unrecognized throughout your childhood and into your early adult life?
Oh, it was unrecognized. I was a child who really kind of fell through the cracks. Things such as 504s and IEPs, they were not as more known in education. I definitely was on teachers' radars. I can look back at old report cards where they would actually handwrite in their comments. Once I finally had the answers, you look back and you go, oh, yeah, the signs were there. It wasn't until after I met my husband and then we got married that we got the first piece of information. And that's where I was given an ADHD diagnosis.
It almost felt like empowering then to learn more about yourself because you felt like you were finally understood. I know for myself, even, growing up with ADHD and social anxiety, I didn't know I had a mental health issue or, imbalance, they would call it. But I really never felt like I fit in. It was very difficult. But yes, and especially I think females are better at hiding some of those symptoms than boys. It's going to show up more outwardly. Whereas girls, sometimes it might not.
I wasn't like a boy who was bouncing off the wall, just the classic signs, a kid that just can't sit still. But I was masking as best as I could. But because of the dynamics of my home life, I had to grow up a lot faster than my peers, too.
Hmm.
The things and the challenges that I was having to face were not what a lot of them were.
Right.
And not even the stereotypical dysfunctional family neglect that you will see as the storylines on the Lifetime channel.
So moving forward, then you have this diagnosis. Was your husband already diagnosed? Was he already aware of? I'll stop there.
As we were raising our children, I was a stay at home mom eventually at that point, and just throughout our marriage, I'm just like, I've tried this, and this, the life hacks techniques with my husband to try to help him on things, but yet They're not working. There's something going on. And I had casually said, like, well, honey, well, I'm curious. I wonder if you have ADHD. And he goes, oh, no, 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 I don't have it in there. And, he would just kind of blow it off, whatever.
Right.
But then time would go on and, I would still say the same things. And I go, okay, honey, now I know you don't think, but humor me. We have health insurance. It'll cover it. Go get evaluated because there's things that you struggle with.
Right.
So he goes, he gets tested, and at the follow up appointment to go over the results, they're looking at this and this, and it's like, oh, you scored, uncommonly really high in these categories, but then there's this other here with focus, and it's just really down the toilet. And he's like, so yeah, you've got ADHD.
But it sounds like then you both had the awareness within yourselves of your own challenges. Was this before you were aware that there were challenges in your children?
Trying to think, by the time my husband was diagnosed, I don't think any of our children had any formal diagnosis. Now, they had definitely some developmental delays with either speech or body awareness, so they received like early intervention services through the school district
Hmm.
before they had started school. But then knowing that we both had that, looking up and doing research, I'm like, well, the statistics are pretty high, the probability that our children might have some things.
What was the diagnosis for each?
Well, my daughter, she got her ADHD diagnosis. She was second grade, I believe.
And how about your boys?
My son, he was, I think, 4, which I know is really young for ADHD, but there was just a lot of signs that was pretty screaming. But at that time, they did ADHD, but they were saying ODD,
Mm.
or they're just uncommonly stubborn. Oppositional defiance disorder is what ODD is. And we're like, okay, all right, well, explain some of this other stuff.
That was in addition to the ADHD?
Yes. But then it would be years between the ADHD diagnosis and the autism diagnosis. We all got our ADHD diagnoses first. And it was at one point talking with some family, a sister of mine who has a son who was diagnosed, and just talking with her, she's like, well, it's sometimes there are a lot of people who have ADHD, but are also autistic.
Right.
And then down the deep personal rabbit trail, I went and doing research, talking with my therapist, just certain things I noticed, even as in my parenting as a mom, I seem to just parent differently.
Hmm.
When moms would be sad to have to leave their children and all that, I mean, I had no problem checking my brain out.
Right.
And at one point, I just kind of had this personal epiphany. It's almost like a God moment. I think I really do need to push about getting an evaluation as an adult.
Hmm.
They were a little hesitant, and my therapist and prescriber doctors saying, well, if you go through with this, what are you seeking to gain?
Well, because it can be expensive. I know that.
It can be, depending on your insurance. There's definitely a lot of hoops to jump through or gatekeeping. And I said, well, I feel like I owe it to myself to really understand myself. And when it was confirmed that I was autistic, it was the first time in my life that I felt like I could authentically give myself grace for my shortcomings. It wasn't for lack of trying or anything else. There were just things that did not connect. And I could stop beating my head against the same wall.
You see that within yourself. So, of course, that empowers you to, gosh, I want my kids to be able to understand themselves better. Was there any additional testing that you had done for your kids then? And did any of them then get a diagnosis for autism?
Yes. But the difficulty is, especially when you're a new parent and you have your well child checkups, they'll do those ASQ assessments. These things to kind of like, oh, are there any flags being raised in your child's development? If it doesn't look like the classic signs, then you don't think, oh, it doesn't apply to me.
So, how were you able to finally get them tested then if it didn't come out in the screening?
With my daughter, we pushed and was able to get her in to be evaluated. And yep, it did confirm that she was autistic.
Hmm.
My boys, for their autism assessments, they were diagnosed within a month of each other, especially when they're really young. If they don't have those very clear classic presentations, the line between ADHD and autism can get really blurry. It's like, well, is this autism or is it really just the ADHD?
So, what led you to find Triada World or this Pearl study? And this was a study, an intervention study that I had mentioned in a previous podcast with Carla Heiser. I know your family participated in that study. How did you find Carla?
It was just one of those casual impulse things someone had posted about the study in a special needs Facebook group. The premise of the study was autism and organic eating. For those who were diagnosed as autistic, what things would change if they were eating a primarily organic diet? And to see, do you notice changes in your children's physical health, mental health?
And this was a 12-week study, correct?
Yes.
So tell me, how did it start out?
It was a crash course of I have to collect how much urine, at what time, and how many collections, and I have to do what with their poop now?
Yeah, there.
What is getting mailed? What do I have to then refrigerate or freeze and then package up and drive an hour and a half to the university who was helping host the study?
And then diet wise, not only organic, but did you also eat gluten free?
Well, when we started the study, they just said, we're going to start you off organic food. Then we start getting the results. Lo and behold, a good chunk of my kids struggled with gluten.
And you didn't realize that until after the fact? How did you recognize that?
When we were getting the results in, especially my youngest, who has an eating disorder called ARFID, which stands for Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder.
Right.
It is to do with high anxiety over food.
It's like anorexia with picky eating. So that's why there is confusion sometimes with ARFID and anorexia,
Hmm.
and being able to identify that true cause of the anorexia is sometimes ARFID.
And guess what? A lot of the food that we know that we could get him to eat were the starches, where's the gluten, pizza.
Hmm.
So he came back with like a lot of issues with gluten.
Okay.
So not only was there some with gluten, but my daughter was very highly sensitive to egg, where it was causing inflammation.
Hmm.
My son, we had difficulty with him. He would say that parts of his body were feeling itchy. And I'm like, well, it's not dry skin. You don't have a rash. I'm just like, it's all in your head. Well, it turns out the reason why I was feeling itchy there was due to candida overgrowth. So yeast.
Our skin often reflects our gut, right? Whether it's acne, yeast,
Rosacea for us older folk.
eczema, rosacea, psoriasis, all of these different things. They're partly genetic, but some of them are 100% gut. I'm sure you felt overwhelmed initially hearing all of these different foods like, okay, you can't have gluten, you can't have eggs, but there were things that you needed to follow across the board anyway, correct? I mean, when you're feeding the family, if some of them are sensitive to gluten and you need to avoid the processed foods anyway and eat organic, it probably was easier just to go gluten free, correct?
A lot of things, depending on the kid and where we were, it was just really having to avoid as much gluten as possible. Then, when the sensitivities came in, really had to rethink. And I turned a lot of times to vegan recipes. Vegan recipes were great resources because I could then see what I could substitute. A lot of things have egg in them, and like, oh, I can do this, but I can use ground flaxseed.
Yeah, you found alternatives. Did you get support there? Did they take you to the grocery store or give you lists of where to buy these foods? For example, Costco, you can find a lot of organic items in bulk that are a lower cost, certain stores that had better options.
They did support and in directing you and saying, here are things that you should be able to find at Kroger, at Costco. I mean, we all know that there's a lot of organic options at Whole Paycheck, or also known as Whole Foods, but
Yeah, it can be very overwhelming. But that's where the coaching came in, right? Do you find that eventually you were able to find options?
Yes, and we would have check-ins with the nutritionist weekly, in addition to having group Zooms where they would educate us about nutrition, things that I'm like, oh, why wasn't we really told these things when you had to take required high school health?
Oh my gosh, nutrition should be taught in elementary school. We learn everything outside of ourselves, yet we know nothing about our own bodies or what we're putting in our mouth every day. You don't think about how your microbes in your gut, whatever you're feeding is what is growing. And if all of a sudden you stop feeding them, they're just like hungry. Like, where's the sugar? Where's the, where's my food? So you're having to starve out those bad microbes, which actually helps decrease that population, makes more space for your good microbes to grow, especially as you're adding more fiber and everything. So, how long did that shift take?
The first week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, we were just irritable to no end. And it finally occurred to me, I'm like, we're going through withdrawal.
Mm,
My kids would say that they're hungry. I'm like, but no, I fed you and it's not even been an hour and a half. And it dawned on me that no, they're thinking they're hungry because their body is craving the stuff that they are not getting all of a sudden.
mhm.
So we were moody, we were irritable, we were grouchy, we were detoxing.
What were some of the first like positive things that you noticed, either mental or even physical or digestive wise? Going to the bathroom, did any of them have constipation ever? Anything like that?
My youngest did because a lot of it having to do with his diet.
Hmm.
It's kind of a blur, but I can say that over the 3 months, the changes that we're seeing was my youngest. I noticed that we made some gains with his ARFID.
Mm,
I was able to get him to actually eat some raw spinach because we didn't have the Tortino's pizza bites.
I think that continued effort, repeated exposure really helps them develop a taste and then get used to the textures.
When it came to food, we weren't being super strict on portions, weighing things out. It was just like, okay, if you're hungry, these are your options. But my daughter, she lost weight. Now we don't like weigh, but I could just, I looked at pictures from where it was beginning of school, like a month before we had started things. And then towards the end, pictures, and I'm like, oh, I could just see it in her face. I could just see it in other parts of her body and going, okay, all right, the inflammation, especially knowing that she really loved eggs and a lot of stuff, a lot of processed food, egg is used as a leavener. And knowing that she was sensitive to the egg, well, that explains a lot.
Right, because inflammation can also increase, you know, water retention in her body, swelling can be part of that weight gain. Plus, she's improving the quality of what she eats. There's no need to count calories or measure food because your body knows how to use that food and it supports metabolism. So I think that's a win-win, really, and it's done without dieting, right? We don't want to put kids on diets. We just want them to have a good relationship with food,
Hmm.
really focusing on the quality and why it matters. Did you talk a lot about the microbiome at all with your kids?
I don't think we got to that point. I think I was just so involved in things that I was just, sometimes it was just survival. I explained things I think about as simple as possible, that there's just stuff in our bodies and we got to get rid of it so it doesn't sit and fester.
So it's really about eating to take care of yourself. It's self-care. No matter how that happens, I think then there's a better relationship with food.
As far as lifestyle, I mean, I wasn't going to a gym. I didn't have an exercise routine. I was just doing all the same stuff I was doing. But the only difference was food that I was eating. I noticed I was losing weight. I noticed some things in my own mental health that were a little better. And one thing that was major was my sleep vastly improved,
Mhm.
where I was able to reduce some medications, especially those that involved sleep.
Right, because that's gonna help your neurotransmitter balance, all of that, because our gut is so connected to so many systems in our body. and then lowering that inflammation, less anxiety, more rest, more restful.
Exactly.
What were some of the mental health benefits that you noticed for yourself?
Just maybe slightly less irritable. I mean, things are changing with where I am in my life. Before, I think some of it involved some perimenopause. So it kind of ebb and flow, but just certain things that were calmer.
Which is great.
Obviously, when your body isn't feeling uncomfortable, then your mental state is going to relax also.
You're just more in tune with your body. There's fewer cravings, more relaxed, lower anxiety.
Oh my goodness, the food noise just really went down. I could maybe imbibe in something that was special or a treat, but it wasn't like this food high.
Right. You were able to kind of separate yourself from that cycle that you were in so that when you just have some of that, it's like, I don't need that much. So, based on that 3-month experience, what has stayed with you that was worthwhile, that is continuing to make a difference for you and your family?
Well, it has been about a year and a half since we started the study. And I believe that the kids and I have not gone to McDonald's since. If we go out to eat, it is a very special occasion, but I don't buy soda.
Has grocery shopping gotten easier?
Yes. Now, is everything all organic? No, especially as this time and with the prices of things. So, sometimes I get the organic meat, and then other times you have to pick your battles.
Right. And I think we have to recognize it doesn't have to be all or nothing, where you're just trying to decrease the burden on your body, right? You're trying to decrease the burden of chemicals coming in. So you're still reducing overall any of those pesticides and just by avoiding processed foods too.
Hmm.
You take a lot of chemicals out of your foods and having more whole foods and cooking your meals, you're getting a lot more nutrients and fiber. So, in total, it sounds like the things that you've learned, the benefits that you felt being in that study have continued to stay with you, that you're making those changes that are possible.
I will say though, and everything that has to do with obviously, with diet, but lifestyle. I don't think that we would have survived making it through the study and then making these permanent changes as if we did not have certain things that grounded us. I am pretty fiercely protective over family dinner time. That with all the busyness that's going on, or doctor's appointments, or homework, or whatever is just going on in the home life and situation, that at least once a day, we all come together as a family and we eat at a table, passing dishes around, bowls, food, and taking the time to just consciously really think about what it is that we're eating, to actually enjoy it.
Absolutely. And it's crazy because I just had this episode just about that, about the importance of a family meal to keep a family connected, grounded, and keeping those phones off the table and then taking that time to share a good meal. Do you think that helps your kids in the school environment?
I think so. But what's really difficult is, especially during a study, when you're in this and now all of a sudden you have sensitivities, you have dietary needs, you realize just how much of our world it revolves around food. The activities you do. Here we're in the fall and there's a lot of, good foods. It's like, oh, well, there's this community carnival. Well, we can't really go to that because what are they giving out for prizes? Candy.
In our family, my 2 kids and myself, we eat gluten and dairy free, and that's very challenging when every social occasion is either pizza, cake. So that's why I think it is good to really bring back the why. Why are we doing this? Why is this important? And if they can come back to that, it just makes it a little bit easier to accept kind of those differences. So I'd love to hear about your book behind you.
Yes.
When did you write that book?
Well, it all started after I'd had my autism diagnosis. I've got like 25 years working with youth, either professionally or in volunteer roles or in church ministries.
Mm,
You get an idea of what kids struggled with, adults struggled with.
right.
So the name of the book here is, and that's okay, I'm wired differently, is it's a neurodivergent book. It's not the autism book, it's not the ADHD book, but it is a book that highlights several kids who kind of explain why they do something the way that they do it. But they don't give a diagnosis because in the real world, you're not going to get a cheat sheet of like, oh, well, here's their health history. It helps give them a voice who may or may not be able to have a voice and have it being heard, while gently reminding that their way is just as valid as anyone else's. Here's an example. There was my son with ARFID,
Oh, that's cute.
and I'll read a page here. Carrots and ketchup are better when paired. Anything else makes my mouth very scared. I'm told to try broccoli. You'll like it. Delicious. Today, no, I'm sorry. I think it's suspicious. And that's okay.
Did you draw the entire book as well? Were you the illustrator?
Yes, I did all the illustrations and the cover of the book.
Wow, that's incredible.
So it's creative. It speaks to children who are neurodivergent and it speaks to kids who are not neurodivergent or unknown. But at the same time, it also speaks to adults and parents because, the world is hard enough to live as it is. And I'm just hoping this book will help be a bridge because it speaks two different languages in the same book.
Well, thank you, Erin, for sharing so much about yourself, your family, your experience, your journey. We really appreciate this because there's so many families out there that have the same struggles, and it's very inspiring to know that they're not alone and that they're heard and that they do belong. So I will be sure to share a link for your book on Amazon.
And I also have some social media that I do try to post to provide educational content. So, follow on there and learn something and not feel overwhelmed. And then, if anything, it may prompt you to do your own research and maybe discover a little something more about yourself that never had occurred to you before.
Well, I'll be sure to include that in the show notes as well. Thank you again for your time. And until next time, we'll see you. Have a good night. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Erin today. It's a true testament to the challenges that can really come up raising a neurodivergent family. And kudos to her for really going through that crash course in changing her diet and lifestyle for her family within 3 months, and how she continues to do so for this next year and a half that has happened since the study. And if you want to learn more about the study, you can look at a previous episode that I had with Carla Heiser at Triada World. And there we talked about addressing autism from the soil to the table and what they're recognizing there and how they are actually working on conducting yet another study with a larger group. Now, if you have any thoughts to share about our discussion today, please leave them in the show notes below. And if you're only listening, head on over to my YouTube channel. Please share or subscribe to increase our awareness, especially this Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month. Until next time, be well.